Hey, welcome to another episode of GeekOutdoors.com. Now, on a previous episode, I did a really quick, I would say almost like super mini review of the movie Logan as soon as I watched it, and I was absolutely blown away by that movie. Now, I'm going to go really into a lot of spoilers in this movie, so just a warning, if you have not seen the movie yet, Logan, why haven't you? But definitely go watch it first, and then you could come back to this spoiler review. So here, I'm really going to go into a lot of detail, my thoughts, just overall how I felt about this movie. And so at some points, I might not be going exactly in step with what everything's happening in the movie, but I'm going to go over some of the parts that I really enjoyed, and also, like I said, really some of the key points that I thought made this movie what it is. So first and foremost, if you didn't already know, Logan is the final chapter in the whole basically Wolverine saga. And I know he's been in about a lot of other X-Men movies. He's made a lot of cameos. But really, this Logan is really the third part in a standalone Wolverine movie. The first being Wolverine Origins, or actually X-Men Origins, which was absolutely horrible. And then after that, we had The Wolverine, which was also directed by James Mangold, who also wrote and directed Logan. But it was really like a PG-13, and they had a lot of influences from the studio by Fox. And so it wasn't really the movie that it could have been, although it was better than X-Men's Origins. And then this one right here, Logan, man, I said in my review, and I stand by it, especially now after having time to think about it. This is absolutely my favorite comic book movie, right up there with Avengers. Avengers is still my favorite because it did so many things, and it's a movie that I could go back and watch over and over. And then second to that is the Guardians of the Galaxy. Or maybe, Guardians of the Galaxy would still be my number 2, and number 3 is Deadpool. But tied for number 1 is most definitely Logan. And Logan is more than just a comic book movie, and that's the first point I want to get into. James Mangold, the scriptwriters and the cast, they really did an absolutely incredible job of making this a movie, first and foremost. This is a really dramatic movie. This is a very gritty, somber movie. It's a very dark movie, so it is unlike any other comic book movie that you've seen. And I know a lot of the Marvel universe, especially when Marvel came back and took it over with Disney, at least not the Fox properties, but they have tried to put more of a tone that would really represent what the comic books offer. Because if any of you read comic books, they are some really amazing stories. They touch on a lot of subjects through many different decades. So that's what Marvel is trying to bring into the actual movies and TV shows, especially the TV shows, specifically on Netflix, which I've talked about a lot of times. So those are truer to what the comic books actually are. And I would safely say Logan and the one before this, Deadpool, with the liberties that they're able to take, especially with the R rating, they're able to bring a lot of these characters to life, truly, without really any restrictions. So that's what I really love. And that's first and foremost, okay? So, at the beginning of the story, it's Logan, Professor X, and a character that I'm not really familiar with, Caliban, and they're basically living down in Mexico in this secluded little farm. I wouldn't say a farm, or just like this old, I guess, industrial area. And they have Professor X inside an old, water tank. And the reason is because by this time, Professor X, he's like in his 90s, and Logan, he's been alive for over 200 plus years. So the timeline on this is around 2029, and I don't really recall which timeline this follows, because as you know, with X-Men First Class, and then all the other X-Men's and all the other Wolverine movies, the timelines are kind of confusing. But I'd like to think that it follows the original X-Men movie that came out in the year 2000. And in the movie, they actually make reference to that movie when they talk about the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so it really, I think, follows that timeline. So it is in the future. However, it doesn't look like the future, especially if you think about Days of Future Past, where they were in the future. So with all of that being said, by this time, all the mutants, as far as we know, they're basically gone, wiped out, okay? In some cases, some of the X-Men were wiped out, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But they're the only ones left, pretty much, that we know of. And by this point, Wolverine, or Logan as he's really known here, is just someone who's really beat down. He's been alive for a long time. He's seen a lot. He's been through a lot. And similarly, Professor X is going through his own challenges, his own hell basically on Earth. By this point, he is not the Professor X that we know. He's just a really, really old man dealing with a lot of mental problems. At this point, he's suffering, I guess, like amnesia in a lot of cases and brain damage. And so he can't remember a lot of things. But at the same time, his powers are still there. And when he has these like seizures, it's absolutely dangerous. And so when you think about that, you understand why he's in that water tank, so that he cannot really affect a lot of people. And then also why Wolverine, one of his initial plans, and the whole plan that they had was for him to build up money so then he could buy a boat so that they could go out there and then just basically die out there and not really hurt anyone. And that, as you're watching the movie the first time, you don't really think about all these little details, because at least for me, I'm just like really absorbing this movie, just becoming really engrossed into it. And so I didn't really think about a lot of those details. However, if you think back to this movie and then why would he do that? Well, if you think to the scene where he was in the casino and then he was having those seizures, there were hundreds of people that could have been killed by Professor X's seizure. That's how powerful Professor X is. And that is why it makes a lot of sense why Logan would want to do these things, okay? Now, Caliban, he helps a lot out earlier. He actually helps take care of Professor X, and I don't really understand why they need Caliban, to be honest with you, because they really don't delve into that. It does serve the purpose of the movie in the sense that Caliban's powers is that he's able to track other mutants, okay? Now, if you go to the whole comic books, Caliban actually is a Morlock. If you want to learn about the history, and then he eventually, I think, is part of one of the X-Forces, or maybe, X-Force, with Cable and them, and he actually gets transformed into a big beast, kind of like the Hulk later on by Mr. Sinister. So that's the backstory of Caliban in a nutshell, but they don't really go into that here. Here, he's just a guy who really can't stand the sun, and at the same time, he could track mutants, and that's really the whole purpose of this, because he is needed to track down X-23 or Laura, okay? And that, it made sense, but, in a lot of ways, they didn't really need Caliban, so I thought that was something that really wasn't needed for this movie, so I still don't understand why he was important to it, okay? But anyways, as you watch the movie, he does kill himself with grenades. That didn't really help too much, but it did kind of help, okay? So as the story's going along, I was really enthralled by the way the characters were displayed here. You first with Logan, right off the bat when he's killing those guys who were trying to steal his limousine, which is his only source of livelihood and the only way that he could get medicine for Professor X, and he just rips him to shreds. And that's where you automatically see that the rated R rating, it is needed in this case to show Logan, show his whole animosity side, his whole feral nature completely unchained, And one thing that I really love the way about how director James Mangold handled this is that, a lot of times if you have a rated R rating, sometimes directors or writers, they just use the rated R just to do violent things or have a lot of cursing or so forth, and they really do not serve the story. In this case, pretty much everything serves the story, whether it's the cursing by Professor X, whether it's the extreme amount of violence by not only Logan, but X-23 and everything else that goes on, it all makes sense to the story, okay? And so the rated R rating really helps tell this story a lot better. I don't think with the PG-13 rating, this would have been able to be a movie that it should have been, which is what this is with the rated R rating, okay? And as we go along, you grow even more attached to the characters, especially when Daphne King, who plays Laura, comes into the picture. If you're familiar with X-23's backstory, there's been many different backstories, but the one that a lot of people are familiar with is the fact that she was part of this genetic experiment who was run by Rice, and he actually had one of the geneticists who actually experimented on herself, and that's how X-23 came about. Okay, so she actually has Logan's, or in this case his real name is John Hewitt, he actually has his genes, and then that was implanted into this geneticist, and she gave birth to X-23. And then later on, due to her feral nature and the triggering of this, she kills her own mom. And then, this is the whole comic backstory, by the way. I'm just kind of giving context into it. And then later on, she knows that Logan, that's where she came from on her quote-unquote father's side. And then she seeks him out. And then, you get into the whole story of Old Man Logan, which is separate, but it does become part of this actual universe of X-23. Later on, if you go through the X-23 series, there's another series where there's the X-23 sisters, okay, who were cloned off of X-23. And then with that story, they actually do meet Old Man Logan, with X-23's younger clone, Gabby. And so if you're not familiar with that, look that up. It's really interesting. And Old Man Logan story, this is really loosely based on, because if you are familiar with the Old Man Logan story, you do know that this had a lot to do with an alternate universe where all the villains take over. And this is, once again, this is spoilers. And so in the Old Man Logan, the Wolverine is the one who actually kills everybody in all the X-Men in the mansion, and that was done by Mysterio, who tricked Wolverine into thinking that these were actually villains, and that's why he no longer wanted to be Wolverine anymore. Okay, and then fast forward to the future, he's just trying to live his life, and he doesn't take his claws out anymore. He's no longer that person, or he doesn't want to be. Okay, now contrast that to the Logan movie, where it's alluded to that Professor X is the one who killed all the X-Men, and this makes a lot of sense. He says it in that scene where he remembers what he did, and that you remember that farm scene when they were at the farm, that's why he felt so much remorse. It was a memory that he did not want to remember. And, as you've seen throughout earlier in the movie, where his seizures are really, really dangerous, okay? And so that makes a lot of sense, and actually makes more sense to me than the actual Old Man Logan story, the comic book, that it would be Professor X who would kill all the X-Men with just his mental power alone. And it's very possible. If you remember the first X-Men, that whenever he has Cerebro on, he could actually see every mutant around the whole world. So he could actually kill every mutant just with that power alone. So, Professor X is extremely powerful. And in many parts of the movie, or a few parts of the movie, he's alluded to as a weapon of mass destruction. And that was really interesting. Now, some other points that I really enjoyed was the way that the character X-23, it was wonderful how in just really quickly, they're able to establish that X-23 is not only someone that is like Wolverine, right? But she's also a human as well. There's a human side to it that I really enjoyed, which also helped build the relationship between not only X-23 and Logan, but also X-23 and Professor X, as well as in a lot of the movies, they're on a road trip and they're more like a grandfather, which is Professor X, father, which is Hugh Jackman, or Logan in this case, and then X-23, which is Laura, that, it's more of that relationship, and that is consistent throughout the whole movie. So you really, really develop this strong relationship for this movie and characters, and that makes it even harder because, as you know, the way Professor X dies, it's horrible. It's really horrible. That was completely unexpected. I thought it was Sabretooth at first, and I think the writers, the director, intentionally did that with the hairstyle, and I really thought it was Sabretooth that was killing Professor X at first, but come to find out, it is X-24, which is the clone of Wolverine when Wolverine was at basically his height, but this is all rage. There's no human side to X-24, whereas X-23 and all the other X experiments before that, they still had their free will, they still had their human side. Henceforth, that whole project really failed, and that goes into the backstory that is not really delved into a lot, So, as you're watching this, you understand that there's this company called Transigen in Mexico who did all these experiments, and it was ran by Rice's son. I can't remember his name. So, and then also the Reavers, okay, with I think his name is Pierce. So he's the one chasing all of them, but he actually reports to this Price guy, who is I would say, the mad scientist, okay? And so they didn't really have a lot to do with this movie. Now, the only reason they were there, to be honest with you, is to keep the plot going along. So they really weren't much of villains, but they were also there to introduce X-24, which is that clone young Wolverine. And this guy was beastly, just absolutely crazy. And this is the berserker rage that you see with Wolverine, but this one's berserker rage 100% all the time. And the director just did some really unexpected things in this movie, which I really, really love. And so when he kills Professor X in the way that was unexpected. When he goes savage and crazy and kills everybody on that farm, the whole family, that was completely unexpected, you know. And then also, whenever this mad scientist, this Rice guy, I'm sorry, or whatever his name is, he was trying to give his whole villain speech of who he is, how come there's no more mutants, all this stuff. Logan just, you know, just like shot him in the head, you know. And this is later on near the end of the movie, actually, that he gave this whole speech, and I thought that was really, really cool. And then the battles between Logan and X-24 and X-23, simply spectacular, you know. And they kept the action, you know. And this is one thing I really wanted to get in deeper in this review, is that the action is so brutal and so vicious and so realistic that you saw and felt the pain that every time Logan got slashed, hit, and every time X-23 was just taking out enemies, just slashing them, stabbing them, you felt it, you know. But there's also an emotional weight to it, as well as, you know, that one scene with Logan talking to his now accepted daughter of X-23 at this point, trying to impart some wisdom onto her, that there is a price to pay for every single person that you basically kill, and she understood that, okay? And that is something that was absolutely wonderful that they did with this movie, that really, really brought more of the emotional impact to this movie, okay? And then the ending itself, I thought it was really fun. I would say there was also, you know, an emotional impact to it as well, because, you know, as you watch the movie, you know, Logan dies. You know, and I was not really expecting that. But man, this last scene where there's just so much action here. And then when you see Logan and X-23 go at it together as a team, that was awesome. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I wish it was a little longer, you know, and I kind of thought they would go like the route of like, okay, so Logan takes his serum and then he battles toe-to-toe with X-24 one last time. But once again, James Mangold really surprised us. You know, he lost that energy, you know, it's like a boost, and he is basically done. You know, X-24, he's no match for him. But then here comes X-23 just going absolutely crazy. And, you know, remember, she's like a little girl. She's like 11 years old. You can imagine how powerful she'll be later on. So she would be more powerful than actually even Logan was, you know. And so, yeah, so absolutely loved it. Now, in terms of the adamantium bullet, I get it, but at the same time, I don't think that would be enough to actually kill X-24. So who knows? We might see X-24 later, you know, because the regenerative abilities, you know, it just can't simply be that easy to kill him. That's my opinion. Otherwise, other people would have done it to Wolverine a long time ago. Just make a whole bunch of adamantium bullets, and there you go, done. You know, but I don't know if there's anything that I missed. I just wanted to hit some of the points, you know, and those are a lot of things that I loved. Okay, I mean, just there's really very little things that I don't like. I would say 99% of the movie I love. Now, some of the things that I don't like, I kind of alluded to earlier. First and foremost is unnecessary characters like Caliban. I didn't really see a need for him. Or even that mad scientist, you know, the Price guy. I don't really feel like he helped the story much. I understand he's tied to other parts of it. And Logan did kill his father in X-Men Apocalypse. And then also the Pierce guy, you know, the head of the Reavers. I get it, but, you know, the movie's really not about the villain. So he helped the actual story. He did in some ways, you know, he has a lot of charisma. But X-24, I think X-24 made sense, you know, and at the same time, it helped fill the whole ending of Old Man Logan versus Young Logan in a lot of ways. And, you know, James Mangold is a huge lover of old westerns. You know, he did 310 to Yuma, and he's also a big lover of the movie Shane. And as you notice, Logan has white tank top and X-24 has a black tank top, so that's that whole Western theme as well. And so, but other than that, I just really not much that I didn't really love about this movie. It's a type of movie that it's very dark, it takes a lot out of you, but it's a movie that makes you think after the movie, long after. And this is a movie that would do well to a lot of repeated viewings because there's a lot of Easter eggs in there, such as when you're looking through the files, you see all the names of the gene that was used, the DNA that was used to create these mutants, and that's cool. And then also what Rice is doing to all the other mutants. There's a scene in there where the military is just basically wiping out any remaining mutants. And there's also unanswered questions about what's going to happen to these mutants when they get to Canada. Are they going to meet up with the Canadian, I think it's called Alpha team, I can't remember. There's an X-Men type like team in Canada as well, and so what's going to happen to them? Are they going to become the brand new X-Men or the new mutants in this case? So there's still a lot of unanswered questions, but overall, absolutely love Logan. It's up there with Avengers, the best acting that I've ever seen in any comic book movie. They really had no restraints in this sense, and it's Hugh Jackman and especially Patrick Stewart. These are classically trained actors. Okay, they've done theater. They are really amazing when it comes to their acting abilities, and a lot of the X-Men movies really limited their overall acting prowess, but in this movie I don't think they were limited in any such way. So that's it for my spoiler-filled review of Logan. If you had any thoughts on it, if you've already seen it, I'd like to know what your thoughts are. And before I end this off, I do want to say I absolutely love the Deadpool trailer, Deadpool 2 trailer or teaser at the very beginning of the movie. That was completely unexpected. But by the time you're watching this video, probably everybody's seen this on the internet as well. So yeah, that's it. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. If you had any other thoughts, Logan, the Avengers, the Infinity War, Justice League, whatever, leave it in the comments area below. And as always, if you did enjoy these videos, you can leave a like and subscribe. And if you wanted to support my channel further, you could do that at patreon.com/Geek Outdoors. All the information is in the description area in this as well. So thanks for watching. See you in the episode. Thanks for checking out this episode. And as always, if you like these videos, be sure to click on the subscribe button. And for full written content, audio content, and additional geek stuff, head over to geekoutdoors.com, and I'll see you outdoors on the very next episode.